We are live. Hello and welcome to the My Veteran Experience podcast. My name is Joe Wallace, and the theme of this podcast is to talk to military veterans and to speak to them about their experiences and how that experience has impacted what they do today. Very excited to have I won't say old friend, but I'll say we've been friends for a few years. Actually, I think since 1988, so a couple of years. So very excited to have Mary Borojevich here with me today. Mary, I think, is sitting in Coronado, California, where a lot of us would like to be sitting. Thanks for coming and being with us today, Mary.
Oh, it's great to be here talking with you, Joe. It's really a pleasure.
Great. Well, so Mary, what do you want people to know about you?
Well, this podcast is about our veteran experiences, Joe. I don't do any social media, so I don't particularly want people to know about me, but I was intrigued when you told me about this podcast. And if my experiences or any of the veterans' experience can be a motivation or an inspiration to somebody, that would probably be my reason for being on this podcast. I don't consider myself a very interesting person, but I will say lots of interesting things have happened to me. And I'd love to share those with whoever might be able to get some, like I said, some inspiration or some motivation from the experiences I've had.
Well, awesome. Well, you've been an inspiration to me in a lot of things that you've done over the time that I've known you. So I would say, why don't you give us a little bit of the background of your military experience?
Okay, sure, I'd be happy to. First of all, it was the greatest privilege of my life to be able to serve in the Navy. But I grew up in the heartland of America in a very small town in northeastern Ohio, in a very small town, and was the only girl and the youngest in the family. So my life really revolved around outdoor life and sports because I grew up with all boys who were exceptional athletes. So once they graduated from high school, I was pretty bored and I was looking for something to do. And at the time, the Vietnam War was just winding down and it was very unpopular. The military was very unpopular. But I remember back then, and maybe it's still true today, that every high school junior in Ohio, maybe in the country, had to take what used to be called the ASVAB, the Armed Services Vocational Battery Test. And what that test did was it tested to see what you would be skilled at or what you would be predisposed to be good at. And I remember that at the end of that test, they said I'd be able to do anything I wanted to in the military. So that was kind of fun. And then I never thought much of it after that. And then once my brothers had graduated from high school and I was stuck in this small hometown and bored, I started thinking about it again. And since nobody else was joining the military, I said, that's the thing for me. Nobody else is doing it. So I'm going to go see what this is all about. So I went and talked to a recruiter. I was very interested in becoming an air traffic controller, but my eyesight wasn't good enough. So as all good recruiters do, he said, well, let's find something else in aviation for you. There was a seat opening up in Meridian, Mississippi at the time. That's where they were teaching aviation supply. So I said, okay, I'll go for that. And that's basically how it started. I had been working since I was 15 years old. I bought myself a new car when I turned 18, and I was basically worried about how I was going to pay for this car. And in the military, you go off to boot camp, you start getting paid right away. So I had a very disciplinarian father growing up. So the military, the discipline and all that really wasn't much of a transition for me. I was used to doing what I was told and staying out of trouble. And so boot camp wasn't all that difficult physically or academically or disciplinary wise. But when they told me that I could retire after 20 years and get a full pension, after 20 years, I was thinking, 38 years old and retired. I just said, tell me where to sign. So I think any young people that would be interested or even thinking about the military, there are so many benefits like that, the VA home loan, veterans medical care. There's so many great benefits in the military, but I was basically an 18-year-old who wanted to get out of a small town and travel, didn't have the money to do that, and I thought the military would be able to fill all of those wishes that I had. So I went off to A school, learned to be an aviation storekeeper, and the first place they sent me was Guantanamo Bay. And I'd never even been on an airplane before. And so I was very excited to be going to a place where I could lay out in the sun every day. It was in the Caribbean, so I loved that tour duty. It was isolated, so I only stayed for 1 year. From there, I went to the Marine Corps Air Station in Beaufort, South Carolina for a few years. From there, I went to Rota, Spain. And I started noticing something, Joe. You graduated from the Naval Academy, so this never went through your mind, but I was noticing that all these officers were getting paid an awful lot more money than I was, and I was almost sure I was smarter than them. So I started trying to figure out how I was going to get a commission, and I made rank as an enlisted person very quickly. I made E6 in 5 years, and so I was used to being successful as I got promoted. And then when I went up for chief, the rating was full. And so I went up 3 times and I thought, I can't have this. Let me see if I can take some college courses at night. I did that. Academics has never been difficult for me. So then I applied for a commissioning program. So 4 years of my 23 years of active duty were actually at university, which was a great deal. Pulling in E6 pay. I was eligible for the Vietnam era GI Bill, so I didn't have to pay for my tuition. So that
So
was
did you go through a program like enlisted commissioning program, or were
Yes.
you were
okay. Yeah, the first program was called EEAP. That was just a 2-year associate's degree, kind of a testing the waters kind of a program to see how good you would do. And I got an honors degree in physical science. And then after that, I applied for the ECP, Enlisted Commissioning Program. Yeah. Back then, you got your bachelor's degree in whatever you wanted, but you had to go through ROTC at the university. So I went to the University of Washington because they were one of the universities that had the Navy ROTC. Yeah, and then after that, I had to go to OCS. Nowadays, you don't have to do OCS. You get commissioned right out of ROTC, which is certainly more fair. But anyway, I went to OCS then from October to February in Newport, Rhode Island. At one point, we had to dig a tunnel through the snow to get to the chow hall, Joe. It was pretty brutal. And I'm not a cold weather person. But the great thing that came out of OCS was I met my best friend. I was in her wedding. She's now a 3-star admiral. Her name's Nancy Norton. And so that was one of the wonderful things that came out of OCS. So then my first duty station as an officer was in lovely Coronado, which when I got here, I thought, I've been all over the world and I think this place might be the best. I don't ever want to leave. So I didn't. So I still live here in Coronado. I did 3 tours of duty here, but my last duty station was at Central Command at a joint billet for General P, who's now the superintendent of.
And just to insert real quick, Mary, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
that's okay.
And that's where we met when you were in Coronado.
Right.
You were with the Surface Warfare Officer School, and I was at MCRD. We both lived in Coronado, and as you say, it's hard to leave that place when you're living there. And so just to let everybody know, that's where we met. And we probably shouldn't go into any of those exploits during our time in Coronado, but we'll leave that to a different. We'll leave that to a different type of podcast.
Yeah, those days were our glory days, Joe, and it was great fun. We worked hard, but we played hard too. But I do remember going to a couple of your graduation ceremonies over there at MCRD and watching you march with that sword. I was so impressed. I remember taking family members because, that's something that civilians really need to see, how hard these young people work and what they have to go through to actually get to the place where they go out and get assigned to duty stations. But anyway.
So you were at Central Command. I saw back that you were at Central Command.
Right. I worked in protocol for General P. It was interesting because one of my brothers went to VMI on a basketball scholarship. And so General P and I kind of clicked, and, in protocol, I was in their house quite a bit. And I've been back with my brother to VMI and have seen him since. He's still there. He's still there looking good and doing well. Although my brother's championship basketball team in '77 was the last championship, I think, sports team that they've had.
Yeah, VMI is such a small school. I mean, how often, are you going to get that sort of team together? So that's interesting.
But anyway, I'd like to say to anybody listening that, because I was brought up in a very structured upbringing. I had a mom and a dad and two brothers, and my grandparents on my dad's side were immigrants. The great grandparents on my mother's side were immigrants, all from the former Yugoslavia, which doesn't exist anymore. It's now 6 different countries. But anyway, being brought up in that kind of family, the work ethic was really instilled in us. So the military wasn't much of a transition as far as hard work and having a structured life. I think what was a transition was I felt I was doing something much bigger than myself. And it was really a great feeling. Especially when I was enlisted, believe it or not, as an enlisted person, getting parts for, aircraft that were flying reconnaissance missions. Those planes didn't fly if they didn't have parts. So, I felt part of something really important. And I felt like I was serving God in my country, because I really was. And then when I became an officer, it was more administrative. It was more, managerial. And not that I didn't appreciate those years, but I really feel like, my patriotism and the work ethic and everything wasn't much of a transition. But now I was out in the world, and the world became so much bigger to me. My horizons just expanded. Like I said, I've been to like 41 different countries. I've been immersed in so many different cultures. I've learned a couple of languages. And then when I retired, I was in a pretty unique situation for most veterans, including yourself, Joe. I had no children and I wasn't married. And so I had complete freedom now. I had a secure income. I bought a lot of property here in Coronado, which has been a real financial windfall for me. And so
yeah, so let me stop you there real quick, because I
Sure.
wanted to hit on a point that I think is it, and you've alluded to it, and I think it encapsulates you as a person. You talked about the hard work and the work ethic of growing up, and you mentioned at the beginning of the call about you worked and saved money for your car, right? So you were working
Yes.
in high school and you saved money for your car. But I remember you were doing some night work when you were active duty in San Diego. You were working for like a law firm or something like that. What did you do what were you
Great
doing at
memory,
night?
Joe.
I have a good memory,
Wow.
Mary. You can't get anything by me.
Great memory. Well, I will tell you, Joe, and I don't know if you knew this about me, but for the first 15 years of my 23 years, I always had at least one extra job. Sometimes I had 2 extra jobs. When everybody else was partying and having a good time, I was out there making money. Even at UW, at University of Washington, they gave all the ROTC people opportunity to be the ushers at the UW football games, which they always have a great football team. And they paid us like minimum wage. So I got to watch the game and get paid. So I was always looking for opportunities in my downtime to earn extra money, because I knew I was going to retire early. And I didn't want to continue working really after I got out of the military. I really wanted my life to be my own. So I would say that I'm probably financially pretty disciplined. I did a lot of investing. My father taught me a lot about investing and so on and so forth. But for me, real estate has always been, the best and most secure way, to get yourself to some financial independence. So, yeah, when you met me, I was working at a law firm. And the law firm was owned by a Marine Corps pilot from Vietnam.
Wow.
And they wanted somebody to do their billing. It used to be all these firms used to hire out their billing to billing companies. And then they figured out they could buy the software and put it on their computers in their office and do the billing in-house. And that was my job. It was great because I could come in whenever I wanted to at night, as long as I got all the billing done that night. And so, yeah, I did that. I actually forgot all about that, but I've had so many part-time jobs just because I was, I have all this energy and I still do.
So that's why you weren't
from.
partying. That's why you weren't partying with us during the week. You were working at the law firm at night.
Well, if you remember, our party and night was Thursday, and
Okay.
because the next day was Friday, it was a work day, but it was Friday, so we really didn't care. We could really turn it on Thursday night, and not be. And plus, I was right down the street. Nobody had to drink and drive. Everybody could crash at my house, and we could be really responsible. But
so you retired, and we've established you're financially secure, and you wanted to have that independence, which is awesome. I wish I could retire. I've got 2 daughters to put through college, but
yeah, but see, you got that, and I don't.
Yeah.
So
it's
a trade-off.
Yeah, sure. So what did you end up doing in retirement?
Well, I, when I had my last duty station at Central Command in Tampa, Florida, I brought my mom and my grandma to live with me. I had a big house there that had another house on the property, and they were getting older, and I wanted to get them out of Ohio because, every winter in Ohio, I was worried about them driving and all that. So I brought my mom and grandma to Florida to live with me. So they kind of turned out to be my children, to be honest with you. But they, my mom drove until she passed away. It wasn't, like I had to take care of them, but I had them with me. And so then when I retired, we came back to Coronado, and I thought I would just relax. I thought I'm just going to relax because you got to, if you remember, Joe, when you're in the military, every day, you know what your hair needs to look like. You know what uniform you're going to put on. The plan of the day tells you what you're going to do during that day. Everything's promulgated. And when I retired, I was like, every single thing had to be a decision. Well, what am I going to put on? What am I going to do with my hair? Who am I going to see today? What'll I do? So I probably spent 6 months riding my bike over to Starbucks and reading the USA Today until it got boring. But here was the problem. That freedom was wonderful. And I don't know if you ever wake up on a Saturday and, I've got to get to work. Oh, no, it's Saturday. Oh, yeah. That's how every day was for me. I'd wake up. I didn't have to go to work. But there was a big problem with that. None of my peers could come out and play, Joe. Everybody else was working. I had bought a boat when I retired, and there was everybody else was working. Everyone had kids in college, or they were going through a divorce, or they were getting married, or and so I just kind of laid low. And I have to say, the best things that have happened to me in my life, God put them right in my lap. I didn't go looking for them. Part of my past is when I got stationed in San Diego, it was the first time where there was a Serbian Orthodox church, just like the Greeks and the Russians.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I know that your ethnic background is a big part of who you are and what you're doing today. That
strong Christian value that that I've had since I was born has stayed with me, and it was great when I got to San Diego because there was a Serbian Orthodox church here. So I was going, and I ended up teaching Sunday school there for about 15 years. And so I was very active in the church, and I loved the kids, and I did that for a long time, and still have a lot of those kids have grown up to be adults, and I still have some of them in my life. But after I retired, it must have been 98. I retired in 97. It must have been 98. I went to church, and one of the women in the women's group said, "Hey, Mary, Princess Elizabeth of Serbia is coming to our church." After Marshal Tito died in 1980, the Yugoslavia became, pretty much a civil war. It came on slowly, but anyway, Princess Elizabeth of Serbia was on a mission to help there were so many refugees and so many children and so much need there after about 20 years of this unrest. So she was at church one Sunday, and one of the women said, hey, she's coming and she's going to 5 cities and she wants to raise enough money to build a children's resource center. Would you be our logistics director for the fundraiser in our city in San Diego? Well, logistics is what I did in the military, and it's what I'm very predisposed. I love logistics. Give me a problem, I can get stuff moved, I can come up with a solution to a problem. So I did that, and I met her, and she and I clicked right away. She's a beautiful woman. She's still living in Belgrade. And she asked me when the last time I was in Serbia, and I said, I've never been there. And she pretty much shamed me into coming. And so I came and I fell in love with the place. As soon as I got there, I felt connected. And she was such an influencer. She introduced me to the American ambassador and his wife. And so I got to know a lot of really great people, a lot of important and, influencers. And so anyway, the money that we raised in the fundraiser, I was there for 17 years. I actually went and I renovated and sold 3 different homes in Belgrade. And I got to be close with my colleagues at the defense attaché within the American embassy. Got to go to a Marine Corps ball one time while I was there, Joe. That was a real treat.
Always a good place to go. Good event to be part of.
And so anyway, at the time, William Montgomery was the American ambassador to Serbia, and his wife, Dr. Lynn Montgomery, became good friends of mine. And they retired, and they live now on the coast of the Adriatic in Croatia. But before they moved and retired there, they stayed in Belgrade for a while, and Dr. Montgomery became a partner of mine. And through 2 grants that we got through the HA arm, the humanitarian assistance arm of the defense attaché, we renovated one orphanage, and then we had a children's resource center built, because orphanages are really kind of going away now in lieu of foster care. They finally figured out that institutionalizing children is the most expensive, least effective way to deal with, kids without parents. So anyway, so I did a lot of real estate during those 17 years in Belgrade, and I, worked with these kids. And then I thought, I'm used to Coronado. I was only spending half of the year there in Belgrade. I was trying to do the spring and the fall because I'm just not a cold weather person. But I thought, we've got these 2 places built now. I'm going to try to get down maybe to Montenegro or on the coast of Croatia where Lynn and Ambassador Montgomery are. So about 3 years ago, I moved. I sold everything in Belgrade. The 2 centers are up and running. The government, that's what an NGO.
So what's the main focus of the centers? Like, you have this the population of children. So what does the center focus on for these children?
Well, when I first got there, the need was so huge, Joe. Imagine trying to buy socks. There were so many refugees living in hovels because, when this war started, Belgrade was bombed in '99, if you recall. So it was pretty bad. And so, when I got there, we had raised this money to open the children's center, and the need was so great. I said, we've got to focus on something. And so I just chose special needs because to me, they're the most vulnerable, especially in an ex-communist environment where anybody with any kind of a difference or a disability is completely marginalized. And that really bothered me. I have a real affinity, especially for Down's children. I just think they're just angels. And so that's what I decided to focus on. And so, the orphanage has gone away. Basically, their special need just was that they didn't have any parents. And then when we built the center, when we got the second grant and we built the center that's right outside of Belgrade, that's all about training kids. Because, a lot of them that are Downs or have autism or maybe in a wheelchair, they have potential. And so we were all about unlocking the potential of these special needs kids. And it is the most fun you can have, trust me. When when you can help a child discover through their through their diversity, through their difference, through their handicap, that they have potential. It just unlocks so many things for them, and it does something for you to be part of that. So I wanted to continue doing that. I got like addicted to it. But I really did, you know, I'm getting older now, Joe. I know you don't, we don't want to admit that, but I thought I've got to try to get to a little warmer weather and you know, try to maybe be a little bit smaller. And Montenegro only has 600,000 people, but they did just join NATO a couple of years ago. So that's kind of a good sign, and it's beautiful there. I found a 300-year-old stone house that I renovated overlooking the Adriatic, and we've got a bunch of programs up and running now there. So, but back to what the military did for me. You know, the military really taught
well,
me.
one second before we,
Yeah, sure.
so your charity is operational in Montenegro, and you say
Yes.
yes. So what's the name of it, and is there a website or something to go
Yes.
to? I want to allow you that opportunity to at least shamelessly plug your, but no, and I'm not shameless. I mean, I'm familiar with your work, and I've been trying to visit, and I will visit here soon enough, but yeah, please share the
Well, you've
name.
been a great, you and your wife Shannon have been a great support to me, Joe. And I mean, she's got her own, you know, 501c. I mean, she understands the world that I'm in. So
Yeah.
anyway, thank you very much for that. And thank you for giving me this opportunity. But it's called SNAP, Special Needs Advocacy Partners. And the website is www.snapartners.org. It's a .org website. So snappartners.org. So SNAP stands for Special Needs Advocacy Partners. So everyone, including you and Shannon, are my partners. And, you know, it's a small organization, but the first 17 years I was working through an organization called Cherish Our Children, which is now focused on Houston inner city schools. Okay. And so that's why I started my own 501c3, because I really wanted to focus just on what's going on there in the Balkans, in the former Yugoslavia. And so now we have a program in Montenegro, and I still have a kindergarten in Bosnia, which is in the little village where my father's father immigrated from. Oh, tiny wow. Little village. And there's a kindergarten that, believe it or not, was bombed by the Croatians during that whole mess. And I found it, and I went to the mayor and I said, I'd like to renovate that if you'll let me bring special needs kids into the kindergarten. Well, you know, we really don't do that, you know, in our world. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But if you want me to renovate the kindergarten, and they hadn't had a kindergarten in 15 years, which is a compulsory component of their education, you know, kindergarten. Right. So now 9 years later, it's part of the community. Everybody's accepted it. It's just, you know, it's a wonderful, it's just a wonderful program we have there. Well, and it doesn't take much money, but I do want to talk about, you know, of course, my military experience gave me the connection to the embassy and to the defense attaché, you know, colleagues. So, you know, what you go through in 23 years in the military, you never know how it's going to, you know, open doors for you as you move forward. I think at an early age, I kind of got all the stuff that I wanted, the house, the cars, the travel, all that stuff. And realized that these things that I was doing actually made me a lot happier. And I mean, there's no reason why you can't have both, right? So I continue working over there 6 months out of the year. I live over there. As soon as this coronavirus gets resolved, the Belgrade airport is still closed, and the borders, unless you're working across the border, I think the borders are still closed too. But
well, let me say something real quick. Let me say something real quick, because you mentioned earlier receiving funds from the military group there at the embassy. So HA, you mentioned HA, which are humanitarian assistance funding, that these so and just quickly, like I was involved in some of that when I was with the U.S. European Command, the Marine Corps component, and we would go to we were in Eastern Europe at the time, and these were NATO candidate countries like Romania, and we always had an HA, humanitarian assistance piece of what we did, and it was rebuilding schools. We rebuilt a school in this village outside of Constanța, Romania, on the Black Sea. So these are, and I don't think people realize to the extent, and there's altruism, but there is also obviously a national security component of why we do this in countries. It's about cooperation and doing good where we want to also have a military relationship. But I don't think the general public realizes the amount of humanitarian assistance funding that the military inserts across the world. I think it's more than the State Department, and it's just interesting. And I really love the part of that work that I was fortunate to be a part of. You just kind of go to a small town. We met with the mayor, and I describe it's like being in some movie where you got the guy with the tweed jacket, and they offer you a vodka, and you have a little drink of vodka, and you talk about doing something that was just sort of out of the movie.
So real. Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. Yeah, I mean, I'll say in Belgrade, I mean, Serbia has what, 6 million people? It's a small country. And the HA arm, I think they get 300,000 or 400,000 a year for a project that's either a renovation or construction, as you said. That's the way it was, when I applied for these two. And then, so when I moved down to Montenegro, I tried to do the same thing there because it's its own country now. Well, somebody beat me to it. They were already building a children's resource center, which is great. But, Joe, all the countries that you've been to and I've been to, one thing is the truth. Everybody wants the same thing, Joe. People want to love and be loved, and they want to raise their family in a secure environment. That's what everybody wants. And it was a real revelation to me. I thought I'd go to Serbia and see the old traditional dress and the old opanke shoes, with the little thing. And, teenagers are the same. These little children that just want to, learn and go to school and play with their friends. It's the same everywhere. So, you can't just go in and have a military presence. I mean, obviously the military is there to win in combat. That's our job. The military's job is to win in combat, but you can't just go in guns a-blazing. These are all human beings. They're all lives that matter. And I think the more that people know that the embassies are doing these kinds of projects, the more supportive the citizenry can be of paying taxes and supporting the military. We do stuff in our own country. I remember when I was active duty down in Florida, there was a Save the Whales. There was the ships were going out and doing stuff for whales. So
I mean, Katrina, you can go all these natural disasters.
Oh,
the military
absolutely.
does big work in. Sure.
So again, any young person that, may be thinking about the military or wants to know more about the military, I just think it's just, unless you're sure you want to be a doctor or an engineer, or, you really know what you want to be. But at 18, I just wanted out of my small town. I was curious about everything. I knew I could work and make money. I just wanted to experience things. And I think the military, don't get me wrong, there are tough times, and there's, late shifts and standing duty and all that stuff. But I just think the military is a great way to love your country and to gain confidence. I think because I'm physically a pretty big person, grew up in a house full of monster men. I've never,
just real quick. I've met her, at least one of her brothers, George. And what's George, 6'7"
and a half,
6'7.5", and he is a monster of a man, and he was a basketball player, I think, in Europe as well, professionally, correct? Yeah. So, and you're not. I'm short, as people who know me, and Mary's taller than I am. So
I'm 5'10", or maybe an inch or two taller than you, but I never really felt physically intimidated. But once I joined the military, and once you become an LPO, a senior petty officer, and you have some responsibility, you become intellectually confident. I started, knowing that I had to know what I was talking about, and I had to be less emotional. I had a great commanding officer one time. I forget what I was pissed off about, but something happened, and he said, Mary, go home. You don't want to make any decisions right now because they'll be the wrong decisions. So go home, calm down, and think about it and come back, and then use your brain and not your heart. And so, all those kinds of things happen to you when you're given responsibility. And wouldn't you agree, Joe, that I think the military gives you responsibility to much sooner, at a much younger age than most of the other professions.
You mentioned, going to the military and then enlisting, and then, and I grew up, and my father enlisted in the Navy, and he became a warrant officer. God, almost, I don't know how many, about 15 years into his career, something like that. And then he spent 30 years. And so I grew up with the military and went to a military school, as you mentioned earlier, and then spent 28 years active reserve as a Marine Corps officer. So it's been my life, and it's had a huge impact. And yeah, it's really given me an opportunity at a very young age to do some really interesting things, to lead people, which is what I really was interested in when I became educated enough to understand what I wanted to do in the military. Is I wanted to lead people and have an impact on people's lives. And I think that it gives you that opportunity at a very young age. So in closing, you already kind of given a little bit of advice, but what advice, or how do you want to close out? And then I'll say a couple things.
Great. Well, Joe, the center of my life is my faith. And so, and the older I get, the stronger my faith becomes. And I think that just endeavoring to do the right thing, endeavoring to be a good person, and to accept that you're going to make mistakes, and accept that things aren't going to be exactly the way you planned them to be. It all boils down to making good decisions. And in the military, we're watched and we're scrutinized, and again, everything's promulgated to try to get us to do the right thing, to have honor and courage. And so I think that works so well with my faith that it was just a really great marriage. And again, making good decisions, being willing to work hard, and being focused. I'm reading a book right now called The Focused Life. And, people think they don't have much control about what's in their head, but the more disciplined you are, the more you can control what you think about. And when you think about good things, and when you think about, resolving conflict and filling a hole that isn't being filled, those are the things that I'd really like to encourage young people to work towards. And it takes years. If I only knew back then, Joe, what I know now. But the military will always be the everybody in my family knows it. Everybody that is a close friend of mine knows that the military really set me up in life, and it gave me an opportunity to really contribute. Contributing feels great, Joe. When you know that you're contributing, it really feels good. So I'm not really a great person to give advice. Again, I'm not, the smartest person in the world, but some very interesting and wonderful things have happened to me. And I can honestly say that every day that I wake up, I'm happier. And so anyway, and I do a lot of this charity work to supplement that. I've still got this reserve of energy. I'll probably do it till I can't walk anymore. And right now, it seems like I can still do everything I've always done. So I really feel like I can continue contributing. And another thing, Joe, this is a great podcast because, all of us that have this veteran experience have this link, and we can communicate it to each other, and we can, together we're so much stronger than we are individually. So thanks for thinking of me. And we talk all the time, but I think this is a great idea, and I'm afraid to look at what I'm going to look like on this podcast, because I've never done one before. I don't do any social media. I'm really not into this kind of thing, but thanks for this opportunity. And if I can think of anybody else, any of our other veteran friends that might be willing to do this, I'll let you know, because it really means something to be able to share. What good is anything if you can't share it, Joe, really?
Yeah, and thank you for that. And yes, as veterans, we do have that bond, and we have a shared experience that a lot of people don't have. And as I mentioned earlier on, I've known you for a number of years and consider yourself a dear friend of mine, and we've kept in touch. I'll just say two quick things before we close out. And you mentioned something earlier about not being intimidated, by many folks. And I remember you told me a story of a friend of mine, a close friend who I went to high school with in the Naval Academy with. His wife was your PT instructor at OCS. If you don't remember that story you told me, but you told me that she kicked your butt.
Was this
She was a lieutenant at OCS, and she was the PT instructor.
Oh yes, she was a tiny little thing. Yes. And she could shimmy up a rope like a spider. But she played great music for us to do our PT too. But yeah, she was fantastic.
Her name is Jenny Urbano. She's married to a guy I went to high school with in Rota, Spain, the son of a career Navy chief. And Chief Urbano, and Rodney and I ended up being Naval Academy classmates as well. So, and then the second story, just to let you know, you mentioned earlier that the Queen gave you a hard time about not having been in Serbia.
Princess Elizabeth, yeah.
Princess Elizabeth, yeah, sorry. Yeah. Not the Queen, Princess Elizabeth. Well, just to let people know, Mary and I did enter the former Yugoslavia together, and Mary made her first trek into the former Yugoslavia. We did a train trip across northern Italy, and ended up taking us across from Trieste, Italy, into Slovenia. Portovos, or Portorosa, I think was the name of the area. So just I'll end with that. And it's been a pleasure as always to talk to you, Mary. And you have a great story, unique story, like we all have our own unique stories. And they all, I think, there's lessons in all of them in what we do. So thank you very much for being with me today, and I hope to see you soon.
Big pleasure, Joe. Big pleasure. Right. Take care.
Take care.
We'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Joe.